The day my father said, "She's not worth saving anymore," I was standing right behind him. He didn't know I could hear him. Or maybe he did and simply didn't care. That was the moment I understood something I had felt my entire life but never dared to accept. I was never truly their daughter. I was just someone who lived in their house. People think pain comes suddenly, like an accident, a betrayal, a slap across the face. But my pain grew slowly, quietly, year by year, until it became part of who I was. And this is my story. I grew up in a family that looked perfect from the outside. A clean house, family photos on the wall, relatives who smiled at gatherings and said, "You're so lucky." Lucky. If only they knew. Inside those walls, love was measured, compared, and often withheld. My elder brother was everything my parents ever wanted: confident, successful, praised even for breathing correctly. My younger sister was their delicate angel, protected from every harsh truth. And me? I was the mistake that didn't disappear. I learned early that crying annoyed my father. He believed emotions were weaknesses, especially in girls. Whenever tears filled my eyes, he'd sigh heavily and say, "Here she goes again, always dramatic." So I stopped crying in front of him. My mother wasn't cruel, but she was absent in a way that hurt just as much. Her mind was always busy with responsibilities, worries, and expectations. She loved us, I think, but her love felt like a task she had to complete, not something she enjoyed giving. Hugs were rare. Praise was conditional. If I brought good grades, she nodded. If I failed, she went silent. And silence in our house was punishment. I was the middle child, the one people forget to count, too old to be cute, too young to be respected. I learned to make myself small so I wouldn't be a problem. At family gatherings, relatives would ask my parents about my brother's achievements and my sister's future. When it came to me, they'd pause and say, "Oh, and what does she do?" as if I were an afterthought. I remember being 9 years old, sitting on the staircase, listening to my parents argue late at night. "Why is she so sensitive?" my father said. "She won't survive the real world like this." My mother didn't defend me. She just said, "She's your daughter." And my father replied, "That's what worries me." That sentence carved itself into my heart. School became my only escape, not because I was extraordinary, but because there, effort mattered. Teachers noticed, friends listened. For a few hours a day, I wasn't invisible. I loved stories, writing, speaking, expressing feelings I was never allowed to show at home. When I was 12, I entered a school storytelling competition. I practiced for weeks in secret, whispering my story late at night so no one would mock me. I came second. Second place. I ran home, clutching the certificate like it was proof that I mattered. I handed it to my mother, smiling nervously, waiting for her reaction. She looked at it once and said, "Second? Why didn't you get first?" That was it. No smile, no pride, no "well done." Something broke inside me that day. I folded the certificate and hid it in an old book. I stopped sharing my dreams after that. If achievements only brought disappointment, then silence was safer. As I grew older, the house grew colder. My father lost his job when I was 15. Money became tight. Stress turned into anger, and anger always needed a target. Somehow, that target was me. "You're old enough to understand. You should sacrifice more. Stop asking for things." So I did. I stopped asking. I stopped going out with friends. I stopped buying new clothes. I took small tutoring jobs after school and handed my earnings to my mother without a word. No one thanked me. They just expected more. One evening during dinner, my father said casually, "After school, we'll marry her off. At least that's one less burden." He said it like he was talking about selling old furniture. I sat there, holding my spoon, unable to breathe. I wasn't a daughter to him. I was a burden to be removed. That night, I cried into my pillow silently, pressing my face into the fabric so no one would hear. I realized something terrifying. If I didn't save myself, no one would. I started dreaming of escape, not running away, but building a future so strong that no one could dismiss me again. I studied harder. I saved money secretly. I planned a life beyond those walls. But life wasn't done testing me. My mother fell seriously ill. Hospitals, medicines, bills, fear everywhere. And once again, I became the one expected to be strong. I cooked, I cleaned, I cared. While my siblings continued their lives, I watched my childhood disappear. I learned how to be an adult before I was ready. Still, despite everything, I loved them. That's the most painful truth of all. You don't stop loving the people who hurt you. You just learn to hurt quietly. Then came the day that changed everything. The day my father said I wasn't worth saving. The day I realized that the family I was sacrificing everything for might never choose me. And that was only the beginning of my story. The night I left my house, I didn't pack clothes. I packed courage. Because courage was the only thing I had left. I remember standing in my room, looking at the walls that had seen every silent tear, every broken dream. Nothing in that room truly belonged to me, not even the bed. Everything felt borrowed, temporary, replaceable, just like me. It all started the evening my father collapsed. He fell in the living room, right in front of me. My brother wasn't home. My sister screamed. My mother froze. And instinctively, I ran to him, holding his head, calling his name, begging him to stay awake. At the hospital, doctors talked about stress, blood pressure, long years of anger stored inside the body. The irony didn't escape me. The man who never showed emotion was destroyed by it. For days, I barely slept. I stayed at the hospital, I handled paperwork, I spoke to doctors, I managed medicines. I did everything a good daughter should do. But no one called me that. My brother came once, complained about work pressure and left. My sister cried, then went home to rest. And my mother? My mother leaned on me like I was the wall holding everything up. Still, behind my back, things were changing. One afternoon, I overheard my parents talking to my aunt in the hospital corridor. "She's too much," my father said weakly. "She questions everything now." My aunt replied, "Girls like her bring trouble, strong-headed." Then my mother said something that cut deeper than anything else. "She thinks she's sacrificing, but honestly, she's just making things harder." I stood there, invisible again. That night, something inside me died. Not loudly, quietly. When my father returned home, the house didn't feel grateful. It felt hostile. Tension filled every room. Every word I spoke was questioned. Every decision I made was criticized. One evening, my father called me into the living room. "We've decided something," he said. That sentence never means anything good. "There's a proposal for you," my mother added. "The family's decent. The boy works nearby." I asked one question, just one. "Can I finish my studies first?" The silence that followed felt dangerous. My father's voice turned cold. "Don't act smart. You're already a burden here." Burden. That word again. I tried to explain. I talked about my dreams, my plans, the future I wanted to build, not just for myself, but for all of us. My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. We fed you, clothed you, raised you. Now it's time you repay us." repay, as if love was a loan. That night, my brother told me quietly, "Just agree, don't create drama." My sister avoided my eyes. I realized something terrifying. I was completely alone. Days passed. The proposal moved forward without my consent. My opinions were treated like childish tantrums. I was told I was selfish, ungrateful, disrespectful. I stopped eating properly. Sleep became impossible. I felt trapped, like a bird whose wings were clipped before it even learned how to fly. One night, my father said the words that changed my life forever. "If you don't agree, you can leave this house." He expected fear. He expected tears. Instead, I felt something else: relief. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the floor. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from realization. I had been emotionally homeless for years. Now it was time to physically leave. I packed a small bag, some clothes, my documents, a little money I had saved secretly over the years. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked older than my age, tired, but there was something new in my eyes: resolve. Before leaving, I went to the living room. My parents were watching TV. "I'm leaving," I said softly. My mother looked up, shocked. "Where will you go?" "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but I can't stay here anymore." My father didn't look at me. "Don't come back crying." I nodded. "I won't." And just like that, I walked out. No dramatic music, no goodbye hugs. No one stopped me. The night air felt heavy, but free. I walked until my legs hurt, then took a bus to a friend's place. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged me. That hug broke me. I cried like I never had before. The next months were the hardest of my life. I worked small jobs. I studied whenever I could. I slept on floors, shared rooms, ate instant food. There were days I wanted to give up, to go back, apologize, accept whatever they decided. But then I remembered how it felt to be invisible. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild myself. I completed my studies. I found better work. I learned to stand on my own feet. Independence didn't come with fireworks. It came with exhaustion, doubt, and constant fear. But it also came with dignity. Years passed. I didn't hear from my family much. Sometimes my mother called asking for help. Sometimes my brother needed money. They never asked how I was doing. I helped when I could, because despite everything, I still loved them. Then one day, everything changed again. My sister called me crying. The family was falling apart: financial problems, health issues, regret. And suddenly, they needed me. As I held the phone, listening to her sobs, I felt a storm inside me. The girl they once called a burden was now their last hope. But the biggest question wasn't whether I could help them, it was whether I wanted to. Because forgiveness is harder than anger, and the final chapter of my story was about to begin. When my sister called me crying, asking for help, I didn't answer right away. I sat there holding my phone, staring at the screen, listening to her sobs echo in my ears. Every old wound reopened at once. Every memory of being ignored, dismissed, called a burden. The family who once told me to leave now needed me. For the first time in my life, the power was in my hands, and that scared me more than anything. I spent the entire night awake, walking back and forth in my small apartment, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I knew exactly what it would cost me emotionally. Helping them meant reopening doors I had worked so hard to close, but walking away forever meant becoming someone I didn't want to be. By morning, I made my decision, not for them, for myself. I went back. The house looked smaller than I remembered, older, tired, just like the people inside it. My father sat quietly in a chair, his hair fully gray now, his shoulders bent under years of regret he never learned how to express. My mother looked thinner, weaker. My brother avoided my eyes. My sister rushed toward me and hugged me tightly, crying like a child. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my mother said softly, "You came." Not "thank you," not "we're sorry," just "you came." And somehow that hurt more. I helped them practically: medical bills, finances, organization. I didn't move back in. I kept my distance. I spoke respectfully but firmly. No more silent sacrifices. No more disappearing. At first, they didn't understand the new me. My father once said, "You've changed." I looked him in the eyes and replied calmly, "No, I finally grew." Something shifted after that. One evening, as I was about to leave, my father called my name. His voice was weaker than I remembered. "I owe you something," he said. I waited. An apology, maybe. But instead, he said the words I never thought I'd hear. "I failed you as a father." My chest tightened. I didn't know how to raise a strong daughter, so I tried to break you, thinking it would make you tough. Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't cry. "I see now," he said quietly, "that you became strong despite us, not because of us." That night, I cried in my car for a long time. Not from pain, from release. Healing isn't dramatic. It doesn't erase the past. It teaches you how to carry it without bleeding. Over the next year, things slowly changed. My parents stopped demanding and started asking. My brother learned humility. My sister grew closer to me in ways we never had before. Boundaries replaced fear. Conversations replaced silence. And most importantly, I finally started living for myself. I advanced in my career. I moved into a brighter apartment. I made friends who saw me, valued me, celebrated me. I laughed without guilt. I rested without shame. For the first time in my life, happiness didn't feel temporary. One evening, my mother visited me. She looked around my home, touching the books, the photos, the small things that made my space mine. "I didn't know you were capable of all this," she said. I smiled gently. I didn't know either, because no one ever let me try. She cried that day, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like someone mourning years they could never get back. And then she hugged me, really hugged me, not out of duty, out of love. Years later, when people ask me where I come from, I no longer hesitate. I don't say, "from a broken family." I say, "from a place that taught me resilience." Because the truth is this: family can hurt you deeply, they can shape your wounds, but they don't get to define your worth. I was never a burden. I was never weak. I was never invisible. I was just a girl growing up in a house that didn't know how to love her, and I survived. If you're listening to my story and you feel unseen, unheard, unwanted, please remember this: you don't need permission to matter. You don't need approval to chase your dreams. And sometimes walking away is not betrayal, it's self-respect. This is not just a story about pain, it's a story about choosing yourself and finding happiness on the other side of everything that tried to break you.